Be'ezrat Hashem, Na'aseh v'natzliach. This week's Torah Nugget on Parashat Miketz is dedicated to Refuah Shlema of Avraham ben Zohara. This week's Parasha begins with Yosef HaTzadik and his story in Egypt. And just to recount, Yosef has a very interesting life story. At the age of 8, he was orphaned. He was rejected and dejected by his family. He was hated by his brothers. He was thrown into a pit filled with snakes and scorpions. He was sold into slavery. He was pursued by the Eshet Potiphar that eventually threw him into jail and was there for 12 years. And just when you think that life can't get any worse, and when you think that things are just constantly going in the wrong direction, we encounter something very interesting, a turning point in Yosef's life. As it says in this week's Parasha, Vayishlach Paro v'ikra et Yosef vayiritzu min haבור. Paro summons Yosef to come out from the to quickly come out from the jail, from the pit, in order for him to interpret his dreams. And after interpreting his dreams, he's so impressed with them. En navon v'chacham kamocha. There's no one wise and smart as you. And later on, he gives him, he gave him the ring, gave him control over Egypt. Paro says that he's in control of the entire land of Egypt, becomes second in command only to the king. And we see over here that in a blink of an eye, in a split second, we see that Yosef's life changed for the better. From here we learn, sheyesh ketz lachoshech. There is an end to the darkness. Meaning, you have to know that when a person is in darkness, when a person is going through difficulties, when people are going through the trials and tribulations that life serves us, know that it's not forever. Know that it ends at one point. The darkness eventually gives to light. Trials eventually end in triumphs. All difficulties come to an end. Yesh ketz lachoshech. There is an end to the darkness. Yosef, however, teaches us how to navigate the moments that we're in darkness. We see that the entire time that Yosef was in Mitzrayim, he had all the opportunities to have the wrong mindset, to be vindictive, to have hate towards his family, to give up on the religion, to give up on God, to give up on everything that Yosef HaTzadik stood for. But through all those trials, all those tribulations, all those tests, he stayed steadfast in the ways of Hashem. Shem Hashem shagur befiv. He had Emunah, he had bitachon. He was happy so much that every time that his life took a wrong turn, quote unquote, he was able to navigate it where he was successful. As we see that Paro, it started off with Potiphar giving the entire household over to Yosef. We see in the jail cell, the jail warden gave him control of the prison as well. Later on, Paro takes a former prisoner, a Jew, and makes him a king over the entire land of Egypt. Why? Because through the entire time while he was down, he was actually in control of his emotions, controls of his Emunah, and knew that eventually this will end. Kol choshech megia leketz. There's an end to every darkness. However, what we need to know is that the way that we navigate ourselves during those moments of darkness is how we build the vessel of the upcoming salvations. Meaning making Torah decisions when we are down. Being happy when things are difficult. Accepting the situation as God's will. That creates that vessel and the size of the vessel for the upcoming Yeshua in your life. So when people are struggling with Parnasa, with Zivug, with Shlom Bayit, with Chinuch Yeladim, all the things that we all struggle with. Who's going to be my wife? Who's going to be my husband? When will I have children? When will I be able to support myself? When will I be successful at raising my children in the ways of Hashem? All those difficulties, the way you are in those moments, your level of happiness, your level of faith, your level of emunah, bitachon, v'shem Hashem shagur befiv, that's what creates the level and the size of the salvation that's coming, because all darkness comes to an end. As a matter of fact, in this week's parasha, we can use an additional story to teach the same lesson. A lot of people struggle with zivugim. They find out it's so difficult, it's so hard to find a soulmate. They say it says that it's as difficult as the splitting of the sea to find a person's soulmate. So if something is so difficult, sometimes people get all depressed, they get anxious, they get they give up because they want to find their soulmate. Sometimes they say, is there anybody out there for me? This week's Parasha, we see a prime example of that also with Yosef. Yosef HaTzadik lived in Egypt. He's called a tzaddik because he's a tzaddik. He went in the ways of Hashem even when he was surrounded by tum'ah. We know that the Gemara says that Mitzrayim has 10 kabin shel tum'ah, shel kishuv. Yerad la'olam, 9 kabin natla Mitzrayim. 90% of the world's impurity, 90% of the world's witchcraft or idolatry was found in Egypt. And Yosef HaTzadik, with everything that he's gone through, after all the hardships that he went with his family, when he finally became a king, he could have let go. He could have said, you know what? I can live the life of Riley right now. I'm on top. I rule Egypt. I have all the money in the world. I have all the comforts. I can have any person that I want. Can be my slave. Can be my wife. Can be my employee. I'm in control. But yet he didn't do that. He held on to his Yiddishkeit. He held on to his to the education that he got from his father and for the ways of Hashem. And just when you are the only Jew in all of Mitzrayim, this most toxic environment possible, how are you going to find your zivug? Especially since he had an additional hardship. He was extremely handsome. It says the Shufrei de Yosef man Shufrei de Yaakov, and Shufrei de Yaakov man the Adam HaRishon. The Yosef looked like Yaakov, and Yaakov looked like Adam HaRishon. His beauty was out of this world. The beauty that was made by the hands of God. So we see that Yosef was pursued by Eshet Potiphar, and there's not a woman in Egypt that wouldn't want to be with Yosef, and he could have had as well if he wanted to. But yet, he can only marry a Jew. So what does the only Jew in Egypt do for Shidduch? Believe in Hashem and Hashgacha Pratit and know that all's for the best. And whatever, even the darkness of not having a proper Shidduch will also come to an end. And the story goes that Yosef married, as the pasuk goes, ויקרא פרעה שם יוסף צפנת פרנח ויתן לו אותו אסנת בת פוטיפרה. It says that after he was elevated in status within the kingdom of Egypt, Pharaoh named him Tzafnat Paneach, and then he gave him Osnat, which is the daughter of Potiphera. The Chazal revealed to us that she's not the biological daughter of Potiphar, but rather the adopted daughter. And how is she the adopted daughter? Well, we know that the story of Dinah with Shem eventually yielded a child, and that child was Osnat, and she was hated, just like Yosef was hated. Perfect couple. And she was hated because of the shame she brought to the family. Because every time that they saw her, it would remind them of that whole incident with Shem. So what Yaakov Avinu did is he wrote a kamiyah. And on that kamiyah he wrote, my name is Osnat. I'm the daughter of Dinah from the house of Yaakov. And he told her, put this around your neck. And at the right time, if you need to prove your identity and where you came from, you could always show this. And when Paro gave Osnat to Yosef, Yosef pled and said, I'm sorry, I cannot marry you. You're not Jewish. And she says, well, yes, I am. And she took the kamiyah and she showed him, I am Osnat, the daughter of Dinah from the house of Yaakov. Imagine, in Mitzrayim, Tesha Kabin Shel Tumah, the only Jew finds the only Jew girl that he could marry. The Kol Choshech Yesh Ketz. As we said, that for every darkness comes an end. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel for every single person. All you have to know is know that darkness eventually gives way to light. Trials eventually end up as triumphs. All difficulties come to an end. This is also reflected in the holiday that's upon us. The holiday of Chanukah. We got to the point that we were mityavnim, that Am Yisrael became like the Greeks, to the point that there was only 13 of us left that fought for the nation of Israel to bring it back to its former glory, or to be Avdei Hashem in the ways of God. And we see that even when there was total darkness, that there was only a little bit left over, which is what the small little family of Hashmonaim, 13 people that went against armies, a myriad of armies. Nevertheless, with that little bit of light, with a little bit of a small army, we were able to bring back the Jewish nation to its glory today. With a famous saying that's being said at these times, a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. So no, if you're experiencing any sort of darkness right now, maybe you're having financial difficulties, maybe it's hard for you to find your spouse, maybe it's hard for you to find your zivug, or maybe to bear children, or maybe to raise children, or any other difficulty you're struggling. Maybe you need some emotional healing, spiritual healing, maybe you need some physical healing. Whatever it might be, know that the darkness eventually dissipates, that all difficulties come to an end. We also have a few pointers that we should remember, that besides the fact that there's always an end to the darkness, the choices that we make while we're in the darkness form the vessel of salvation that we're going to experience in the future. And when you're down, make sure not to fall. You can be down, but be happy and make Torah choices. Do not fall, because that's what the Yetzer Hara wants us to do. Remember, when you're making Torah decisions in your lowest points, that creates the size of vessel when you get to your highest points of the Yeshua. Furthermore, the darkness that we're in today, the rise of anti-Semitism, all this hatred around the world, this too will come to an end. And how? A little bit of light pushes away a lot of this darkness that we're experiencing in the world today. And the little bit of light is the small beracha that you make, the little perk of Tehillim that you read, the little tzedakah that you give, the little bit of ruchaniut that wins over the gashmiut. The little bit of ruchaniut that wins over the gashmiut is what increases light in this world and puts an end to the darkness and the spiritual darkness in Am Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom V'Rach.